Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Q&A for the Feldenkrais method to reawaken your body. Somatic practices for flexibility, balance, and a calmer nervous system. I'm Ann Patricia with the Shift Network, and it is my deep honor to be your host as we explore the teachings of Lavinia Plonka and address questions about her upcoming course, which begins on Thursday, June the 11th at 12 noon Pacific. Now, if you can't join us for this course live, you can still participate with us. I'll be explaining more about that as well as other important details later. But first, I'd like to introduce my guest. Lavinia Plonka is a body language expert, teacher, and author specializing in posture, movement, emotions, and the mind. Her background spans theater, dance, yoga, and the martial arts, and she has taught the Feldenkrais method for over 25 years and is also an assistant trainer. She is an artist in residence for the Guggenheim Museum and a movement consultant for theater and television companies around the world. She's done many, many things and is just a wonderful all-around person. She's currently director of the Asheville Movement Center in Asheville, North Carolina. And now I welcome Lavinia to our session. Welcome, Lavinia. It is so nice to have you here.
It's so great to be here and to see you. Thank you, Ann.
Sure. So we're going to spend the rest of our time together exploring your questions for Lavinia as we prepare for her video course, The Feldenkrais Method to Reawaken Your Body, which begins Thursday, June the 11th at 12 noon Pacific. Go over to our website, fmethodcourse.com. That's fmethodcourse.com or feldenkrais-methodcourse.com. You'll learn all about the 12-module course and you'll find a link to register. So we're going to get started with your questions. I want to thank all of you who sent in so many questions ahead of time through our webcast. And for those of you that are joining us live, please type your question into the chat and I'll read it out for Lavinia. So we're going to start with one of the questions sent in through our webcast from Nancy. Nancy says, one of my worst habits is leaning forward into the computer or when driving, both of which give me a stiff neck. I straighten up when I catch myself, then I do it again. What can you say about this? She says, thanks.
A lot, actually. So both of the things that you described have to do with where my attention is being pulled, right? So when I'm looking at the computer, I have this feeling that I'm getting pulled by my eyes. I'm trying to focus. I'm trying to get my interest focused right in there. And the same thing when I'm driving a car. That also connects up, though, with certain aspects of, you could say, anxiety or intensity. Our body is ready for action when we move forward in that way. If you think about someone who, suddenly sees something, they go into action by moving forward. And because of the fact, especially when we're in cars, we think that we're very relaxed in a car and we're just driving along, but actually we have the potential for something happening at every moment. And sometimes the nervous system starts to pull us in that direction. Same thing with the computer. You're working away and then all of a sudden something happens and you go, what? And then you get stuck in that, you could say, yellow alert intensity position. That impacts on your breathing as well as on your posture. So I think we all catch ourselves in that position in contemporary society these days. And one of the best solutions I can think of is the moment that you see that, just take a moment to just stay there, intentionally stay there for like a breath or two, and then give yourself permission to let go. It's going to keep coming back because of the different stimuli we have, but you can also work with letting it go and letting it go. And eventually you may find that you don't get pulled in as often. But remember that it is a physiological response to either something of intensity, interest, or danger. So maybe you can also look at your relationship to those kind of stimuli.
So Sarah is saying, can you speak to the Feldenkrais method's ability to support and heal emotional trauma? She shares, I've been doing the Feldenkrais method for about 3 years with a private practitioner, and I found it so helpful physically, but also mentally and emotionally as well.
Well, first of all, you are thinking, sensing, feeling, and moving all at the same time, all the time. So everything that happens to you emotionally or mentally, as well as physically, impacts on all of those other parts of yourself. If you're in a car accident and you hurt yourself, there's going to be emotions that are attached to it. If you have been emotionally abused, there are going to be sensations attached to it. So what the Feldenkrais method does, and one of the things that I absolutely love about it, is that it uses movement, simply movement, without trying to go into analysis or story. And it uses that movement to help me start to see where the tension or the holding or the difficulty is in the physical part of myself, in my movement, in my breath, in how I carry myself. And when that reorganizes itself, when it untangles itself, it also allows the emotion that was associated with that tension to let go as well. So bit by bit, we start to learn new patterns, new habits, and new ways of using ourselves. So that's the best way that I can describe. One thing that is really important from my perspective in terms of how the Feldenkrais method works with emotions is that it doesn't try to kind of make everything change at once. We honor the safety of the environment. And if you are holding because of an emotional trauma, and someone tries to take away that protection, then you feel very, very vulnerable. But gradually, as you begin to untangle these different things, you're going to be able to find a way to respond to situations without having to go back to this older habit that was designed to protect you.
Lavinia, many people, we got a lot of questions about how Feldenkrais can support peripheral neuropathy and other types of neuropathy. Can you speak about that?
It depends on the neuropathy, of course, but one of the ways that we can support it is simply by, if you think about neuropathy is something having to do with the nerves, and the Feldenkrais method works with the nervous system. So by working very delicately and carefully and patiently, one can begin to start to have a different relationship with those nerves. We can't awaken dead nerves, but we can create sensations around. We can find new avenues, new pathways, new possibilities so that some of that neuropathy can be relieved. I will say it is a process, and it takes time and it takes patience, because once you have that kind of nerve damage, you need to work with yourself very consistently in order to do that. It's not a quick fix kind of thing. You want to really spend some time, but there are some really wonderful lessons. There are some practitioners around the country actually who are specialists in that. And so you might want to go a little bit further. For example, on the Feldenkrais website, there are some, Feldenkrais.com, there are some wonderful articles about how the Feldenkrais method can help with neuropathy.
Thanks, Lavinia. So this question from Jude, I saw on the sales page that there is a connection between the pelvis and TMJ. I have had a broken tailbone and have had trouble with my low back, and also have TMJ. I'm just fascinated by a possible connection. Can you speak to this for a minute?
Oh, I would love to. It's one of my favorite connections. Because, of course, when I was first discovering this method, I had the worst TMJ. I could sometimes not even open my mouth at all. And, it seemed like a coincidence that I also had terrible lower back pain. So there's a couple of different ways that it's connected. One of the ways is to think about the jaw itself. Feldenkrais actually called the jaw the little pelvis, because when my jaw is tight, it connects up with the muscles of the spine that go all the way down the back to the pelvis, so that it creates tension in the pelvis, and vice versa. So if you have tension in your pelvis, then you're going to feel tightness in the neck, and the neck affects the jaw. If you have tightness in your jaw, then it's going to communicate down to your pelvis in the same way. So by working that relationship, because they're both connected via the spine, by working with that relationship in the spine, you can begin to release both of them to a more effective way.
Great. Thank you so much. Danny is sharing, how do you break the habit belief that all information needs to come through my eyes? That my eyes have to be on duty all the time, even when I'm moving in a completely different part of my body.
Well, I don't know when that occurred, right? Sometimes that kind of thing occurs when we're younger. For example, if there was some sort of immobilization that caused a person to feel like they have to take something in, or whether a hypervigilance has taken place because of a feeling of a lack of safety that makes us think that we have to take everything through the eyes. I mean, the eyes are big information gatherers. They take in light, they take in seeing, they're part of your vestibular system. They are important information gatherers. I'm going to guess that you also gather information through your ears if you hear, if you have any kind of auditory abilities. So there is information coming in through there as well. What happens sometimes, though, when people become hypervigilant or are using their eyes excessively in that way, it could be a number of different things that are going on. But one of them is not trusting your own proprioceptive senses. When I say proprioception, I'm talking about the knowledge of where you are in space, where your limbs are, how you relate to the other parts of yourself, and how you connect kinesthetically to everything around you. And so relying on the eyes, especially people who have balance problems, can be, again, another source of a great deal of tension, protection, and tension in the neck, which paradoxically, or I guess you could say it's a vicious cycle, takes away your proprioceptive abilities. So it's interesting that you bring that up, because in Module 1, we're going to be talking about the eyes and how the rest of the self can support the eyes in taking in the world. So it's almost like, I heard that question and I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what we're going to be doing in Module 1, is how to relax the eyes, how to be able to take in information with other parts of the self, and also to connect my proprioceptive system with my eyes, which are very much a part of that.
You also shared about the eyes and brain health. Can you speak just a bit more about that? That was really fascinating in terms of people who have had brain injury and how Feldenkrais and the eye exercises support improving brain and actually healing some of the brain injuries.
Okay, yeah, I touched on that a little bit in the last talk I did. But, when you think about, again, that your eyes they're sending information directly to your brain. There's a part of your brain that is called the visual cortex. It's taking the information that's coming into the world and interpreting it as, umbrellas and people and things like that. So when I have brain damage, it can distort my visual ability. The other thing that happens, though, is when anyone has had a brain injury, sometimes people get headaches, people get different emotional reactions. And a lot of times it's got to do with the fact that somewhere between the eyes and the brain has kind of created a disconnect. So we have a lot of lessons. When you think about also that the optic nerve, right? So we've got the optic nerve as a nerve that's in your brain as well. And that's helping you with your information and translating that information. So we use a lot of different eye approaches to help people reconnect, whether it's lessons that help you with kind of improving the quality of how your lens is being used, the muscles in your eyes, which again we'll be addressing in Module 1. There are lessons where we use imagery, closing the eyes and looking inside and connecting even left and right brain through different processes. And in that process, not only does it allow the visual sense to calm down if that's been part of the brain injury, but it kind of helps us reconnect sort of somatically to these parts of ourselves. So I don't know if I can give more of an answer than that without getting into a whole process, but certainly the idea of thinking of left and right brain, eye-hand coordination, which is often compromised when somebody has had any kind of a brain injury. All of that, we use imagery, we use relaxation, and we use just simply working with the movements of the eyes.
Thank you. So a few people have addressed the way that there's slow movement, such slow movement with Feldenkrais. So there's a few different questions that have come in about this, asking if it's the slower the better, or once you get the movement, do you do it a little faster? Can you speak to the pacing that you use in Feldenkrais?
Sure. We use slow when we're gathering new information, right? In our daily lives, we move so quickly. I mean, we've adapted and learned, which is, marvelous and important, right? If we had to do everything in slow motion, we'd never get anything done. So the nervous system and the motor cortex have, over a lifetime, developed the ability to be able to respond to everything. So, you can drive your car and listen to your radio and eat a bagel all at the same time without even having to think about it. But what happens is, over the course of our lifetime, we also develop habits around those things that are maybe not so useful, maybe habits of tension or habits of compensation from an injury, or habits of doing something that maybe isn't the best. And the only way to be able to see the habit is to slow it down a little bit. So an example I can give is of someone who every single time they go for a cup of tea and they hunch their shoulders up and go like this, right? It's a completely unnecessary, or what Feldenkrais would call, parasitic habit. And that habit may have begun in childhood when the child was actually a little bit worried about spilling and being nervous about it being hot. And this became, and being maybe judged with how they drink. And then it's a lifetime habit that you don't need, or that this is a constant thing that's going on in their lives that they don't need. So then in a lesson, we break it down, we slow it down, and you start to see how maybe I can move in another way that doesn't require as much tension to accomplish the same goal. Now, that being said, once a person has started to explore a movement, we do speed things up sometimes. I mean, in some of our more advanced lessons, we roll up to standing, we work fast, we work slow. But in the beginning, you work slowly so that you can see, so that you can begin to recognize, oh, there's a thing I do with my buttock, or who knew that I needed to grip my teeth when I reach my arm up? You don't notice those things in your daily life. You can't notice those things because we're so fast at what we're doing. So it's a little bit of both, right? Slow in the beginning, playing later. To me, it's more about exploring, playing, learning. There's no rule that says you're not allowed to move fast if you don't want to.
Thanks for that, Lavinia. So Susan is sharing, can you speak to how we begin to change a pattern? She says, I felt great improvement in my lung capacity from the breathing practice that you shared in the event last week, but it didn't last very long. So how do we begin to make the change that lasts? It's a good question.
It is a good question. And so, I wish I could talk to Susan and say, well, Susan, did you try it again? Because if you have a life habit of shallow breathing, and that life habit of shallow breathing has served you up until now, right? You're still breathing, then your nervous system, it might get a hit of a cool idea of, oh yeah, that increased breathing felt really good when I did it, and that was really nice. But then the minute you go out into your life, your nervous system goes, oh my gosh, no, I've got to go back to what feels safe, what's familiar. I was just reading a book called Physical Intelligence that talked about the importance of the human brain for being with things that are familiar. And so what we do with Feldenkrais is we're taking you into the unknown. Oh, I had no idea I could have a breath like that. It's new, it's novel, it feels great. But then I get in my car and I need to go back to the familiar. So the process of reorganizing, of learning more functional habits takes time, repetition, and attention. We see the possibility. We see that we can change. The very first time I took a Feldenkrais awareness through movement lesson, after the lesson was over, I bent down to tie my shoe, and I was shocked because I didn't have any back pain. That didn't mean that the back pain went away forever. It came back the next time I had stress in my life. But you start to develop tools in order to support you, and over time, your more functional habits will take over from the less functional habits that you developed as survival strategies through your life.
Thanks so much, Lavinia. So we're here with Lavinia Plonka learning about her course, The Feldenkrais Method to Reawaken Your Body, which begins on Thursday, June the 11th. So go on over to fmethodcourse.com, feldenkreismethodcourse.com, and you'll be able to check out all the details about this course. And please, if you have a question for Lavinia, type it into the chat, and I'll be happy to read it out for you. So we have this one from Gabrielle. I am 70 years old now, and I feel a lot of aches and pains in my back, especially in the morning, and have intermittent sleeping problems. Otherwise, as far as I know, I'm in good health. I'm not very supple and have never done any sport apart from walking long distances, which I enjoy and do regularly. Do you think starting with this new regime now can increase my quality of life at this point?
Well, of course, I'm biased. I think that exploring the Feldenkrais method could increase anybody's quality of life at any point, because who doesn't want to understand themselves a little bit better? Who doesn't want to know a better way of moving? For example, if you started doing Feldenkrais lessons, you might find that the way you walk has less effort to it, or you get more mobility, or you end up being able to walk longer. I mean, who wouldn't want that? And you know, the other thing about the Feldenkrais method is that by knowing myself a little bit better, I'm clearer about how I am in the world, right? Because Feldenkrais said we move according to our perceived self-image. So who am I? And I like myself, but I could like myself even more. I could like other parts of myself. He used to say that he made this method so that we could learn to love ourselves more. And so who wouldn't want that at any point in their lives? I think that the thing I love about Feldenkrais is that it's complementary to everything. If you're an athlete, your sport becomes improved. If you're a musician, you start to play better. If you're an actor, you're more spontaneous and more able to respond in the moment. And if you're an aging adult, you're able to suddenly run upstairs or pick up your grandchild a lot easier than you would be before you do Feldenkrais. Because by learning to move better, by learning to be aware of how to use yourself more efficiently, you're actually able to do more the way you want to do it.
Ginny is saying, I was recently diagnosed with AFib and wondering how Feldenkrais raises awareness of how our heart operates.
So how it doesn't actually bring you into, I mean, of course, we can sense our heart. You can sense your heartbeat. You can learn the relationship between, your heart and your lungs and your vagus nerve. And we'll talk a little bit about the vagus nerve in one of the modules. And we'll also be looking at the relationship of the lungs and the heart. But the thing that I find with Feldenkrais in relationship to something like that is that it gives me more information about how I function. For example, when do you have, when does an attack come? Is it random? Do I have resources when I start to go into AFib? Are you on medication for it? And is there a lot of stress because of that? So to me, the Feldenkrais method is useful for any kind of working with the heart, because your nervous system is communicating with your heart all the time, right? Your vagus nerve actually touches your heart, and then there's a whole bunch of other nerves, of course, that are there. So if I find myself calming myself, I'm going to have a healthier system overall. In terms of knowing how the heart operates, that's more looking at it from an anatomical perspective, and we want to look at it from a somatic and sensory perspective. You can go into imagery. There are other somatic approaches that go deeply into trying to see the organs. But what I look at is, well, how are they relating to each other? For example, if you inhale, how does that lung impact on the situation of your heart? What does your diaphragm do for your heart? So you can begin to understand that process and see if that helps you find a better relationship to the heart itself. AFib is tricky because there are so many different reasons for why it's occurred.
All right, this one from Lance. Lance is curious about what the difference is between Feldenkrais and Hanna Cymatics.
So Thomas Hanna was one of Feldenkrais's first students. In fact, he was instrumental in bringing Moshe Feldenkrais to the United States. And so he was a great proponent of Moshe Feldenkrais's work. But, as happens with people, at a certain point in their relationship, Thomas wanted to do his own thing. He wanted to create what he calls Hanna Cymatics. So he created his own method based a lot on the teachings of Moshe Feldenkrais, and then, of course, continued to create some of his own specific ideas that he added to his training. And unfortunately, he died prematurely. I believe it was in a car accident. So people really never got the full benefit of Thomas Hanna's teaching, and the Hanna Cymatics teachers have gone on their own and explored different ways of expanding what Thomas Hanna brought. But a lot of the lessons that are in Hanna Cymatics are based on the teachings of Moshe Feldenkrais, and then they take it a little bit further with using ideas like pandiculation, which is, extending different parts of your body, and using resistance in different ways. And those are innovations that Hanna brought to the work. I think both methods are really great.
Thanks, Lavinia. Isabel is curious about the vagus nerve. Can you speak about that? And how does the Feldenkrais method address it?
Well, like anything else internal, like when I was talking about the heart, we don't address it directly, but we look at different ways that it affects us, and then how different sort of exercises we do could influence or tone the vagal nerve, which is the way people talk about it sometimes. So the vagus nerve, I don't want to get into a whole thing here, but it secretes different hormones based on whether you're feeling safe or you're feeling unsafe. And so I think I've said several times already that in Feldenkrais, we're looking at creating safety. So through that process, we're allowing that vagus nerve to begin to generate the hormones like oxytocin that allow us to feel safe and be in a place where we can learn in an environment that feels conducive to creating something new. And that said, we actually have a module, and I'm going to take a peek because I can't remember what number it was, Module 7, where we're going to be looking at how Feldenkrais developed a lesson that uses sound, which sound is a way of toning your vagal nerve to tone the whole self and bring us to this parasympathetic state, to this relaxed state. And I'm not saying that sympathetic is bad, but in our case, when we're working in this way, we're going to see if we can bring it there. And then, as I said before, the vagus nerve touches every organ in your body, and it connects up into your head. It's actually your 10th cranial nerve. So it's going to affect the way you express your emotions. And of course, I already said we're thinking, feeling, sensing, and moving all at the same time. So as we move, we're impacting on how that vagus nerve is sending information to how you express yourself.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I want to take a few moments to just Before we go into more questions, just to tell you a little bit more about the Feldenkrais method to reawaken your body. Somatic practices for flexibility, balance, and a calmer nervous system. So this is going to be a really transformative 12 weeks, as you can tell with Lavinia, where you'll learn to soothe your nervous system and break free from tension, pain, and restriction. 12-module course will take place on Thursdays at noon Pacific starting June the 11th. And you'll receive audio and video replays and transcripts and all other materials through what we call our virtual classroom, your course homepage. Also, I'd like to remind you that we offer a no-risk money-back guarantee on all of our courses, giving you a full 2 weeks until July the 2nd in this case, to make sure you absolutely love this course. And as an added option, all participants are welcome to connect with one another and Lavinia on the private course Facebook community group to stay connected. And everyone who registers receives a special Feldenkrais method to reawaken your body bonus collection. And this includes this 8-part audio program from Lavinia called Fall Softly, Recover Quickly. It also includes what your vagus nerve system has to do with your health and what you can do to feel great. This is a video dialogue between Lavinia and Eleanor Silverstein. We also have an audio from Lavinia called Heaven and Earth with the Pelvis Between. Fascinating. And for those of you that know you want to join us for this course and are ready to commit, if you register by midnight Pacific, Thursday, June the 4th, that's today, you receive this very special bonus called The Art of Living a Creative Life. This is a dialogue between Lavinia and Tiffany Sankery. If you're ready to feel more aligned with your creative path, please listen to this dialogue, this video dialogue between Tiffany and Lavinia. All right, so we have time for a few more questions. And one is here. Shilpa is saying she's really appreciating this session. So you're welcome, Shilpa. She looked it up in the website. She wants to know a little bit more about the sessions, Lavinia. Can you speak a little bit more to how much is practice, whether it be actually moving, how much is lecture?
I'm going to keep the lecture actually to a minimum for this series. I have so much to share, but because I want everyone to have a really clear physical practice, probably about 10 minutes will be just sort of exposition of the idea, looking at the theme, and then we'll have a movement practice. And just about every module, I also have an exercise that one can do to integrate that movement sequence and that theme with an aspect of sort of clarifying our intention for moving through life, because how you move is how you move through life. And I want everyone to have an opportunity to see how things connect. How do I see? How do I see myself? How do I breathe? How do I breathe in information? What do I shoulder, for example, will be a way that we explore not just the function of relaxing the shoulders, but exploring the burdens that we carry in our daily life. So, you know, a good portion of it is practice, a little bit of lecture, and then, of course, we have a question and answer period at the end of each one.
Yes, we do. It's all recorded and posted for you. So Mary is sharing from Facebook, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis 6 years ago, and it is getting worse. I told I must be very careful with exercise. Could I do this?
Yes, and as has been spoken about several times before, you want to stay safe. So most of the lessons that we're going to be doing, I was just looking over at my modules again, are done in a lying down fashion. And so if you are not comfortable lying down on the floor, you could do them in your bed. A lot of the lessons can also be done in a chair. You could do minimal versions of the movement, right? Feldenkrais used to say, it's not the movement that's important, it's the attention I pay to the movement that creates the differences that make a difference in my life. So even if you were doing minimal movements, but bringing your awareness and your attention to your breath, to the quality of your existence, you would be benefiting from the work that we're offering here. And then, of course, because you get a recording, as you continue, you can begin to, see what your possibilities are, see if you can move that limitation a little bit outward. But you never have to do more than is safe and comfortable for you, even if that means that a whole portion of it is just imagination. I shouldn't say just imagination, because your brain is creating how you feel at every moment. So imagination is an important part of being more functional.
So Claire and a few others are asking about getting down on the floor. Do we have to get down on the floor for this class?
You don't have to. Nobody has to get down on the floor. So the way I always recommend it is, if you really can't get down on the floor, start on your bed. Some of the lessons we're going to be doing in standing or in chairs, and so then you'll be fine, or you can adapt it to be in a chair. There's a couple of lessons where I would really recommend that you get down to the floor, but if it's one of those lessons that I really want people down on the floor, I'll try to make sure you don't have to get up too many times. The idea is to be able to move comfortably. And I know that there are people who took the entire first 7-module course that we did, and they did the entire thing in their bed and got a great benefit from it. So each person has to start from where they are. If you can't get down to the floor, maybe by the end of this course you will be able to.
So we have several people really curious about how Feldenkrais can help with plantar fasciitis. Can you speak a moment about that, Lavinia?
Well, just like with anything, plantar fasciitis is complex. That has many, many different causes. But a lot of times it has to do with either how the foot has been striking the ground for most of our life in relationship to the knee and the hip and the ankle. And, because if you think about it, plantar fasciitis, what is it? It's your plantar ligament and then the fascia around your ligament that's inflamed. It's an inflammation that actually eventually goes away for most people, but it's very, very painful. And it's often the result of use of self. And so if you've spent your life, for example, striking a little bit with the foot pointing out a little to the side, or if you have one hip that's a little higher than the other, or if you push off differently, all of these little habits over the course of a lifetime eventually lead to what we call a cumulative event, right? I mean, you're fine, and then suddenly you're not fine because finally that plantar ligament went enough already. So in Feldenkrais lessons, and we'll be looking at that actually, I think it's in Module 11. Yes, in Module 11, we'll be looking at how you can start to work with the relationship of your foot to your ankle, to your knee, to your hip, all the way to your pelvic floor, and find how just delicately reorganizing that can begin to reduce that discomfort. And then you might find, oh, for me, it's in my ankle. Wow, I really, really feel how my ankle is very stiff and I can work with that. Other people are going to find that it happens in their hip or even in their low back. So you can never say that plantar fasciitis is the result of one thing. It's usually because of a bunch of things that have been happening over the course of a lifetime, which is why a lot of young people don't have plantar fasciitis.
And it brings to mind why these are called awareness through movement lessons. Yes, it's about awareness so that we can start to check in with what's happening in our own bodies. Yes,
that's right. If I
Go
just
ahead,
continue,
Lavinia. Thank you.
Just through that process of developing awareness of how you walk, right, and how you carry yourself, it can change everything all the way up through to your head and even to your jaw. And the other thing to remember, of course, is that your plantar ligament is going right towards the arch of your foot, and even how you pronate or supinate your foot can also impact on that. Sorry, I could get really carried away on the feet.
We love that about you, actually. Can you say more about, John's asking, can you say more about parasitic habits?
Sure. That's a term that Moshe Feldenkrais developed or used a lot. So we are habits. I mean, unlike any other animal, we're only born with one reflex, and that's the startle reflex that happens when you think you're going to fall or when you hear a sound, right? Other than that, everything a human person does is learned, right? A calf comes out of the mother and can stand up within seconds. It takes us a year to learn how to walk. It takes us a long time to figure out how to get food into our mouths. So that process of developing habits in order to be able to function in life is a learning process. So what happens as we go through life, we learn different things from modeling on our parents, modeling on other adults, and we take on their particular postures, their ways of doing things. Then we have different traumas that happen. Something happened at school, or you had an injury, and then we develop compensatory habits, all of which are really important at the time. It's important to learn to walk like daddy so that daddy will like me. It's important to walk very carefully because I might spill something. Even work habits, for example, people who work like a jeweler has to really look very carefully at something, and they develop a habit, they develop a skill. To become a great musician, you have to develop the habit of how you hold the instrument. But how you hold the instrument with ease and fluidity, or with tension and fear of being criticized, that fear of being criticized was a survival habit that you don't need anymore. So those are parasitic habits, habits that were useful at one time for your survival, for you to be able to move into the world, that are now literally eating away at your ability to be who you want to be. They're feeding off of your own nervous system. And so we, through these slow movements, begin to recognize the parasitic habits that our bodies have embodied, and we start to untangle them and replace them with more functional habits.
Thanks so much, Lavinia. So I want to begin to transition us. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. The Feldenkrais method to reawaken your body begins on Thursday, June the 11th. Again, please visit fmethodcourse.com. You'll be able to check out all the modules and find a link to register. And if you do so by tonight, midnight Pacific, June the 4th, you'll receive the special bonus of Lavinia and The Art of Living a Creative Life with Tiffany Sankari. Lavinia, I'm passing it over to you for some final words to our listeners, anything you're most excited to share. Go ahead and take your time on that before we close and move into our moments of silence.
I suppose the only thing that I really want to say is how this work changed my life. And the reason that I chose this path instead of staying in show business was because I felt like it was really, really important to let everyone know the possibilities that exist for each one of us. And actually, if you don't mind, Anne, and this is like happening to me spontaneously in this moment, but there's a Feldenkrais movement that comes from the notion of bringing our hands together in what in many cultures is prayer. And it feels right for me to close with that as we're going through these challenging times. So if everyone wouldn't mind just joining me to just hold your hands a little bit apart from each other, and then just allow them to come together, feeling as they get closer how that connection starts to happen between your two hands. I'm bringing my hands together. I'm bringing my thoughts together. My thoughts are my hands, and my hands connect up with my brain, and then let them come apart and just feel that connection. And then letting your hands come together and allowing them to go up towards the ceiling and following with your eyes, and feel your spine as you raise yourself up. And then as you bring your arms down, let your arms continue downward, let your head continue downward, and soften your spine so that the whole of you can become receptive to whatever is here in the world, right? Prayer, or bringing my hands together in this way, is not just about the hands. It's a whole body experience. And so I thank you, and thank you, Anne, for giving me the opportunity to be spontaneous in this way.
Oh, I so appreciate that, Lavinia. And thank you for being with us, Lavinia. It was wonderful having you here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. On behalf of all of us here at the Shift Network, I wish you well, and I look forward to having you on this course or on one in the future.